Carl Jung didn't use the modern MBTI term INFJ directly, but his foundational work on psychological types is what built the very basis of what we now call the INFJ personality. So when we say Jung spoke of the most dangerous empath being the one with an INFJ brain, our emphasis is Jung's understanding of introverted intuition paired with an unusual depth of feeling. Jung described introverted intuitive types as rare individuals who perceive reality not as it presents itself on the surface, but as it unfolds symbolically, unconsciously, and across time. They grasp the hidden structures behind human behavior, culture, and even history, almost as though they can sense the blueprint before others notice the foundation. This rare perceptive ability, when married to the INFJ's auxiliary function of extrovert feeling, creates a person who not only understands human nature deeply, but also feels compelled to act on that understanding in ways that touch other people's emotions. For Jung, introverted intuitives were often misunderstood. He suggested they carried images of the future, visions that were difficult to explain in rational terms. These visions were not fantasy, but a profound attunement to unconscious processes that most people ignore. An INFJ, therefore, experiences reality not in snapshots, but in flowing streams of meaning, seeing where events and relationships might lead long before others catch on. If this person also carries empathic sensitivity, they don't just predict outcomes abstractly. They feel the emotional consequences within themselves, almost as though they're living the inner life of another person. Jung pointed out that such individuals could become prophets, reformers, or visionaries because they are moved by both vision and compassion. That combination is precisely where the idea of the dangerous empath emerges. If you want to truly understand yourself and unlock your full potential as an INFJ, check out the INFJ Playbook today. The link is in the description of this video. The danger does not mean harm in a malicious sense, but rather the transformative and sometimes unsettling influence they exert on others. An INFJ empath, in Jungian terms, can look directly into the hidden motives of those around them. Their intuition pierces masks, cutting through false personas and exposing the fragile truths people try to conceal. Because they are also guided by extrovert feeling, they know exactly how to speak or remain silent in ways that shake a person's soul. Jung believed that the introverted intuitive could seem uncanny, even threatening, because of how naturally they reach into the unconscious thoughts of others. Paired with empathy, this becomes even more powerful. They're not only reading you, they're feeling you, and then mirroring back what you were too afraid to confront. He also noted that every psychological type carries a shadow. The INFJ's shadow often involves suppressed thinking and sensation, which means they may appear gentle, nurturing, and quiet until provoked or until their vision requires defense. At that point, their empathy is not simply softness. It can become a scalpel, cutting away illusions with startling precision. They understand pain intimately, and because of this, they know exactly where to touch the psyche to awaken someone to truth. That is the double-edged sword of INFJ empathy. It heals and it cuts. It comforts and exposes. And because it operates from a depth most cannot comprehend, it makes the INFJ empath both inspiring and formidable. He described introverted intuition as oriented toward the archetypal realm, where symbols, myths, and collective patterns reside. An INFJ empath does not simply see one person's story. They connect it to the story of humanity itself. This makes them profoundly persuasive, for they speak to others not only at the level of personality, but at the level of archetype. When you feel understood by an INFJ, you feel seen as if you were part of a greater narrative, and that experience can change you permanently. Jung warned, however, that such types also run the risk of isolation, because their perceptions are too unusual for the majority to grasp. They may feel alienated, carrying truths no one wants to hear. Yet, when they choose to share, their words land with the force of revelation. This is why Jung's insights help explain the modern idea of the INFJ empath as the most dangerous. They are not dangerous in cruelty, but in clarity. They sense what lies beneath, and they can articulate it with such uncanny empathy that defenses crumble. People who are used to hiding behind pretenses feel stripped bare in their presence. At the same time, those who long for genuine connection feel liberated by the same force. The INFJ empath destabilizes the false and strengthens the true, and that dual capacity makes them both feared and revered. His work reveals that the rarest types are those who live between worlds, the conscious and the unconscious, the individual and the collective, the personal and the universal. The INFJ empath embodies that liminal state. They do not just mirror society, they anticipate its evolution. They do not just soothe wounds, they diagnose their root causes. To encounter such a person is to encounter a mirror that reflects not only who you are, but who you might become. And it is that power, empathetic, intuitive, transformative, that justifies the phrase, the most dangerous empath is the one with an INFJ brain. Jung also believed that introverted intuitives live with an almost magnetic relationship to the unconscious, not only their own, but the collective unconscious of humanity. This is important when thinking about the INFJ empath because it means their empathy is not confined to individual interactions. They can absorb currents of social tension, cultural shifts, and hidden collective fears in ways that most people barely notice. Their empathy stretches beyond personal relationships into the realm of archetypal patterns, which is why they often sense societal change before it arrives. This makes them dangerous not just to individuals who hide behind masks, but also to entire systems that are built on illusion, injustice, or denial. Jung suggested that the intuitive's visions can disrupt the status quo because they expose truths that threaten the foundations on which false stability rests. Another observation he made is that the introverted intuitive type often feels a duty to give form to what they perceive. For an INFJ empath, this means they don't only feel what others feel, they feel compelled to translate that into action, guidance, or creative expression. The danger here lies in their ability to crystallize invisible emotional realities into words, art, or strategies that cannot be easily dismissed. An ordinary empath might feel deeply, but remain silent. An INFJ empath transforms feeling into a clear message or plan that demands to be heard. Jung considered this drive toward articulation as both a burden and a gift, for it forces the intuitive to act as a bridge between unconscious truth and conscious awareness. Jung also pointed out that intuitive types often experience uncanny foresight, a quality that can unsettle others. In the case of the INFJ empath, this foresight doesn't manifest as cold prediction, but as deeply emotional anticipation of what someone or something will become. They may sense the end of a relationship while the other person still feels secure, or foresee the collapse of a system while those within it are still celebrating its stability. Their empathy means they experience the emotional fallout in advance, and their intuition allows them to act with a wisdom that others mistake for manipulation. This ability to hold foresight and compassion simultaneously is part of why they can be perceived as dangerous. They wield timing with almost surgical precision, knowing when to speak, when to wait, and when to intervene for maximum effect. He also explored how introverted intuitives can connect seemingly unrelated ideas or events, forming patterns that others miss. For the INFJ empath, this capacity extends into the emotional domain. They can see how one person's suppressed trauma affects their relationships, their career, and even their worldview, weaving a map of interconnected pain. With empathy guiding their insights, they can reveal to someone not only what they are feeling but why they are feeling it, and how it has shaped their entire life narrative. Jung believed such revelations could be transformative but also destabilizing. It's one thing to feel understood, it's another to have the architecture of your psyche laid bare. That level of exposure is what gives the INFJ empath a kind of feared authority. They don't just sympathize, they dismantle illusions at the root. Jung's work on individuation also provide another clue to why INFJ empaths are seen as uniquely powerful. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self. INFJs, through their empathic intuition, naturally catalyze this process in others. Their presence can stir shadow material, forcing people to confront parts of themselves they have avoided for years. They act as mirrors that not only reflect, but magnify the hidden aspects of the psyche. This catalytic role is dangerous in the Jungian sense because it forces growth, and growth is often painful. Yet, without that kind of pain, there is no transformation. In Jung's eyes, the INFJ empath embodies the archetype of the wounded healer or the visionary guide, whose gift is inseparable from their burden. They live on the edge between healing and unsettling, nurturing and dismantling, and it is in this tension that their true influence lies. He emphasized that the intuitive type often has access to knowledge that cannot be traced through ordinary logic. He described it as an almost irrational certainty, a conviction that arises without evidence but proves accurate over time. For the INFJ empath, this means their insights often bypass conventional reasoning. They can look at a situation, a person, or even a cultural movement, and simply know what lies beneath or what direction it will take. This creates an aura of mystery, sometimes even suspicion, because others cannot retrace the steps of their reasoning. Jung warned that this ability can provoke both awe and fear, since people naturally distrust what they cannot explain. For those on the receiving end of an INFJ empath's insight, it feels as though their soul has been read without permission, and that unsettling accuracy is what makes them so formidable. He spoke of the tendency of intuitive types to live in images and symbols rather than concrete facts. For an INFJ empath, emotions themselves become symbolic language. They don't just feel sadness in another. They sense its archetypal weight, grief as loss of identity, anger as a symbol of repressed power, joy as a glimpse of transcendence. Their empathy operates not only at the surface of emotion, but within its symbolic depths, translating feelings into universal meanings. This symbolic grasp allows them to address pain in a way that resonates beyond the personal, reaching into the collective human experience. Jung argued that this symbolic orientation could make intuitive types into visionaries, priests, or healers, because they reframe ordinary suffering as part of a larger journey. When an INFJ empath engages with someone, they don't just acknowledge their pain. They give it a place in the narrative of growth, which can be both deeply healing and deeply unsettling. Jung observed that intuitive types are often at odds with the material world because their attention is fixed on what is unseen. In the INFJ empath, this can manifest as a detachment that others misinterpret as aloofness. Yet this detachment is precisely what gives their empathy its edge. Unlike those who get lost in emotional enmeshment, the INFJ empath feels deeply while maintaining a vantage point above the situation. This dual position, immersed in emotion yet not consumed by it, allows them to intervene with remarkable clarity. They can enter someone's experience, feel it fully, and then step back to offer a perspective that the person themselves could never access. Jung believed this balance of immersion and distance gave intuitive types their rare authority, but it also made them dangerous to those who rely on confusion or denial to maintain control. His ideas on the tension of opposites also illuminate the power of the INFJ empath. He argued that growth comes from holding the tension between contradictions until a higher resolution emerges. The INFJ empath naturally embodies this principle. They hold compassion alongside confrontation, tenderness alongside truth, foresight alongside presence. This paradoxical way of being allows them to catalyze transformation in others, because they neither reject nor collapse into extremes. They can hold space for someone's light and shadow simultaneously, which dismantles defenses more effectively than either sympathy or critique alone. Their danger lies in this equilibrium. People cannot easily categorize them as simply kind or simply harsh, which disarms the usual strategies of resistance. He recognized that those attuned to the unconscious often draw others into their orbit, sometimes without intending to. The INFJ empath, with their mixture of sensitivity and vision, exerts a gravitational pull. People feel both comforted and exposed in their presence, as though they are standing before a mirror that shows not just the surface but the hidden core. Jung described this effect as numinous, carrying a sense of both awe and dread, because it reminds people of forces larger than themselves. When the INFJ empath embodies this role, they become a living reminder of truths people would rather avoid but cannot escape. It is this unavoidable encounter with the self, with the future, with the collective unconscious that makes them, in Jung's framework, the most dangerous kind of empath. Jung often spoke of the psychological weight carried by those who live too close to the unconscious. For the INFJ empath, this closeness means they are not only sensitive to their own hidden depths, but also to the repressed material of others. Jung warned that when someone exposes another person's unconscious content too suddenly, it can cause resistance, fear, or even hostility. The INFJ empath often finds themselves in this precarious position. Without trying, they become catalysts for other shadow material to rise to the surface. People may project anger, envy, or suspicion onto them simply because their presence awakens truths long buried. This unconscious triggering is part of what makes them dangerous, not through aggression, but through the involuntary way they disrupt others' fragile psychological balance. There's also the concept of psychic contagion, the way emotions or psychic states can pass invisibly from one person to another. Most people remain unaware of these subtle transfers, but the INFJ empath is acutely attuned to them. They can sense not just overt moods, but undercurrents, the quiet despair behind a smile, the restrained hostility in polite words, the unspoken yearning beneath indifference. Their ability to detect and sometimes absorb these currents gives them access to hidden knowledge about relationships and groups. Jung believed this type of awareness could border on the prophetic, since it reveals truths long before they become visible. In social settings, this makes the INFJ empath both magnetic and unsettling, because others feel that nothing within them remains fully private. Another point he stressed is the power of the inner voice, or what he sometimes called the voice of the self, which directs an individual toward wholeness. The INFJ empath, because of their highly developed introverted intuition, tends to live in deep conversation with this inner guide. Unlike others who ignore intuition or dismiss it as vague, they treat it as a compass. This grants them a kind of inner authority that is difficult to challenge. Even when external voices attempt to sway them, they often hold to a course that feels destined or inevitable. Jung noted that this can make intuitives appear stubborn or even mystical, but their conviction gives them a quiet strength that unsettles those who rely on persuasion or manipulation. The danger here lies in their unshakable alignment with an inner truth that often outlasts external pressures. Jung described the introverted intuitive as someone who is guided less by what is and more by what is becoming. This forward-leaning perception gives the INFJ empath an almost evolutionary role in human relationships and culture. They are not content to merely comfort someone in their present state. They instinctively nudge them toward the person they could become. Jung recognized that this kind of influence could feel intrusive or overwhelming because it doesn't allow people to remain stagnant. The INFJ empath often perceives the unrealized potential in others so vividly that they speak to it as if it were already alive. For the one being guided, this can feel both inspiring and unsettling, as though their hidden future has been dragged into the light before they were ready to face it. If you want to truly understand yourself and unlock your full potential as an INFJ, check out the INFJ Playbook today. The link is in the description of this video.